There's a documentary, as if any really needs to be made, about that late, not lamented lech and pornographer Hugh Hefner, that talked about all these orgies 5 nights a week and how he drugged women with quaaludes. You know, and remember old Bill Cosby did that too, probably influenced by Hef because he was a frequent guest at the Playboy mansion. And it was total debauchery. So this thing, I'll put the link in and I'll come back to it. But you know, the world was really a better place when old Hef, you know, bit the dust in 2017. And I wrote a little obit about him on a blog that I've got. But anyway, I wrote, publishing mogul and legal pimp Hugh Hefner, one of the people responsible for the sexual revolution in 1953, out of his garage, he published a magazine called Playboy, has died. He was 91 going on 17. Hef, as he was known, was the right person at the right time. The 1950s were an oppressive time for so many people. Back then, men and women weren't encouraged to have sex until they married, and they often didn't wait, hence the shotgun marriages. The sex roles were truly shitty. Men had to go to work and support the wife and any kids resulting. Life was no fun after one's teenage years. Marriage was expected by certainly the mid-20s. Hef, who himself had a wife and a couple of kids, also found the lifestyle constricting, so he came up with the idea of a magazine that would be entertainment for men, in quotes. And it was a phenomenal success. It didn't hurt that the first centerfold was none other than Marilyn Monroe, featuring pictures of her before she became famous and published without her consent. Although Hef loved to brag about the quality of the articles, especially the interviews, the real selling point was Hef's trafficking in female nudity, which would continue for decades until the magazine abandoned it, when it could no longer compete with online pornographers. Meanwhile, Hef had Playboy clubs and other business interests all over the world. His LA home, dubbed the Playboy Mansion, was almost as legendary as the owner. It was known for excess and debauchery, traits Hef had in spades. Among his noted guests was Bill Cosby, a man who also had a ton of skeletons in his closet. Hef was known to drink Pepsi by the gallon and lounge around in his bathrobe and pajamas, always in the company of women half and later a third or a fourth his age. While many hailed his influence on American popular culture, Hef was truly a piece of shit who didn't make the world a better place to live. He really wasn't. He was pretty vile. As bad as the 1950s were, women would be further pressured by men in the 1960s and beyond to have sex whether or not they wanted it. The sexual revolution was a true misnomer. It was solely on men's terms. Men on the left end of the political spectrum in particular worshipped Hef and were envious of his lifestyle. Never mind how utterly revolting that lifestyle was. It looked more and more perverse the older he got and the younger the women were. There have been many exposés on Hef by those who close to him. It was not a charmed existence, at least not for the women who got stuck with him. As I recall, the seeds of his debauchery were when he was a very young man and had fallen in love with a young woman named Millie. They got engaged, but Hef went into the military. While he was away, Millie had an affair with somebody else. When Hef found out, he was shattered. Millie felt tremendous guilt over what she had done, but instead of breaking off the engagement, she married him and had 2 children with him. Moreover, she encouraged Hef to cheat on her as a way to atone for her affair. It was rather a sick relationship, and eventually the two of them split, but amicably. Millie would work for Hef's company for many years, and their daughter Christy ran the enterprise for many years, when she became an adult. Meanwhile, Hef continued on with his degenerate lifestyle, flaunting it for all the world to see. There were women after women, supposedly thousands of them. making him a breeding ground for disease, plus a couple more wives thrown into the mix. He remarried many years later to one Kimberly Conrad, and I misspelled her name here. I think I left another E out, who was around half his age and had 2 more children. The media made a big deal out of this, but that Conrad finally tamed the old lech, but the marriage eventually went kaput. After Kimberly, there were more and more women, mostly to keep him company while he doled out money to them in order for them to survive. Finally, at the young age of 85 or 86, Hef married for the final time to a woman young enough to be his great-granddaughter, Crystal Harris. She was about 60 years younger than Hef. It was almost like pedophilia met necrophilia, although I exaggerate just a tad. It was revolting no matter how one looks at it. As sexist as his enterprise was, Gloria Steinem actually did an expose of it while working as a Playboy bunny. Hef did give a lot of money to a variety of liberal organizations and claimed to support feminism, of course on his terms. That still didn't change the fact he was pioneering pornography, which has been a detriment to our society and further objectified women as merely sex toys to be used and abused by men, both in the industry and in society as a whole. His was not in any way, shape, or form a positive influence on society. He trafficked in human beings. Not a good legacy to leave. So I wrote that after he died. But anyway, he really felt like he owned the women, according to this article and according to this documentary that's coming up. And no, I'm not going to watch it. A 10-part docuseries? Why would you need to have it in 10 parts? I mean, you could do that in an hour. But all this is pretty old news, you know, including the claim by Linda Lovelace, who wrote a book called Ordeal, and she had to have sex with a German Shepherd, I think oral sex or some damn thing, while her husband was there, you know, threatening her life. Chuck Trainer, that was her husband at the time. And that book, Ordeal, was a disturbing book. That was written in the early 1980s, and the author of it also passed away, as did Linda Lovelace, or Borman, or Marciano, I should say, at the time that she died. She was killed in an auto crash, but about 20 years ago. But the book was almost benign compared to what we see now in pornography. I mean, it was horrid then. It was absolutely horrible, and her life was threatened. And people poo-pooed it then, but we know now it's even worse now for women that are trapped in that industry. But anyway, that was one of the things I guess this documentary talks about, and also his debauchery with the Quaaludes, and that I mentioned earlier. And he had to have 4 or 5 women, you know, doing orgies and shit in front of him. And oh God, you know, he was scum. He was scum, and yet he was lionized as a figure of the 60s. But he was disgusting, and yeah. Yeah, he was only 27 when he launched the Playboy magazine. He was just disgusting filth. And the thing is, some of the comments after this article in the Daily Mail, of course, but they think, well, the women chose this. They could have gotten out, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of almost like a cult. I mean, he owned these women that were involved because he had the purse strings. And, you know, and a lot of them had come from abusive backgrounds, or they were, you know, or poverty, or whatever. You know, they were barely of age. You know, women in their late teens into their early 20s, and one of them was kind of a family friend that he ended up debauching, and was only like 17 or something. But he was just disgusting. But no, the women, you know, if you don't have many options in life, you're marked. If you're a young woman, fairly good looking, and by conventional standards, you're marked. You're marked to be exploited in the sex industry. And just because Hef was a little bit less objectionable than some of these other ones, that doesn't make him not objectionable, because he's the one that pioneered porn and made it acceptable to the public, and it's not good. It's not a good thing. So, no, I don't plan to watch this 10-part docudrama or whatever the hell. No, documentary. I guess it's a docuseries. So, and there was somebody that was a friend of the family, and who was a friend of my sister's, and one of her sons, who's now deceased. But he worked, I think, at the Playboy Mansion, and he didn't think much of that at all. It was just disgusting. It was totally disgusting. Not impressed. But yeah, it was, he was a pioneer of a lot of this debauchery by the rich, and now we've got billionaires that want to foist debauchery on the American people through various means. But anyhow, yeah, I plan to miss this docuseries. There's no way I'm going to sit around and make time for it. I got other things to do, like cry in my beer or cry. And I haven't talked about him in a few videos. But yeah, I had a hard day again. And it ain't going to get easier. I've got some pendants that I ordered in the mail, and I got those that I'm going to wear up in Idaho. And I had debated today, well, maybe I shouldn't, I shouldn't do this. Bullshit, I'm going to do it. If for no other reason that I need to do it. So anyway, that's enough of Hefner. That's enough of all this bullshit.